Harriet, a house slave on the Blackburn Plantation in Southern Virginia, who vanished one stormy Halloween night in 1860, and whose lantern, they say, still burns through the dark fields when the wind begins to howl. The locals call it the light that never dies. They say it drifts across the old farmland, weaving between the ruins of the manor, glowing faintly through the fog, a reminder that some spirits never sleep. The Blackburn Plantation stands in silence now, its windows shattered, its doors rotted from decades of rain. But when the harvest moon climbs high, the air seems to change. The wind grows sharp, carrying with it the faint scent of smoke and something older, something that feels like memory. Every Halloween, travelers passing through the valley claim to hear it, a soft knock echoing from the manor's front door, 3 times. Slow, steady, like someone waiting to be let in. Some say it's the storm playing tricks. Others swear they've seen the lantern flicker through the second-floor window, moving from room to room as though guided by an unseen hand. But those who've gone too close, they never stay long enough to find out. Who's holding it? It's a story passed down through generations, whispered by firelight, carried on the breath of fear and fascination. A story that doesn't die, because it isn't finished. Tonight, we return to where it all began, to the fields soaked in rain, to the house built on silence, and to the woman whose footsteps still echo between the walls. Before she became a legend, she was flesh and blood, Harriet, the quiet one, the one no one noticed, until the night the knocking began. Because some hauntings aren't born from death. They're born from what the living did to the dead. Before we start, let's connect with each other. Comment below where you're from watching this video, and what's time there. The Blackburns were known across the county for their fine manners, their silver cutlery, and their sprawling acres of tobacco. But those who worked that soil knew a different truth, that the house was fed not by fortune, but by fear. Edward Blackburn ruled it, with the calm cruelty of a man who believed himself righteous. He called it discipline. His wife, Margaret, called it order. Together, they built a world where silence was the law, and obedience was the only language that kept you breathing. Each morning, before the sun climbed over the river, Harriet would rise from the cabin behind the smokehouse and step into the kitchen, a room alive with fire and command. Her hands never stopped moving, stirring, chopping, carrying, cleaning. She spoke only when spoken to, but each clang of iron, each hiss of boiling water, each cruel word from the mistress carved deeper into her. The walls of the manor were polished white, but they carried echoes, faint, muffled sounds that slipped through the cracks at night. A cry cut short, a whip's breath, then stillness. It was said that even the air inside that house seemed to flinch before the master entered a room. Around her, the enslaved whispered of running, of rebellion, of revenge, but dreams like that were dangerous things. They died quietly, before sunrise, buried beneath the fear that ruled every corner of the estate. Harriet listened but never spoke. The others thought her broken. But she wasn't. She was waiting. Because beneath her stillness, something small had started to move. It was the sound of her own heart, steady and deliberate, learning the rhythm of defiance. Every order barked her way, every insult thrown like ash, only taught her how deep silence could go, and how powerful it could become when it finally broke. And soon, it would. Eli was her light in a world that had none. A field hand with calloused palms and a quiet smile. He carried hope the way others carried scars. He used to say that one day he'd buy their freedom, that he'd walk north with her, under a sky untouched by chains. In his pocket, he kept a small piece of rope from his childhood, worn smooth, soft at the edges. For the day we leave, he told her, to tie our things for the road. But on the Blackburn Plantation, dreams like that didn't survive long. One morning, the overseer claimed Eli had stolen a handful of tobacco. There was no trial, no defense, just accusation and the weight of a white man's word. By sundown, the tree behind the well bore his body like a warning. The same oak that shaded picnics in summer now held death by its branches. Harriet stood at a distance, her face still, her hands trembling against her apron. No one dared to meet her eyes. When the body was cut down, she was called to clean the rope. She washed it, she wrung it dry, and she folded it carefully, silently, before setting it on the overseer's porch. Not a word left her mouth, but every movement carried a message. I saw, I remember. That night, the kitchen fire burned low, and the laughter from the house above floated down through the walls, muffled, distant, cruel. Each sound was another shovel of dirt over Eli's grave. Each breath she took was heavier than the last. Something inside her had hardened, sealed by grief and heat. From that moment, Harriet's heart turned to stone. Her eyes no longer watered. Her voice no longer trembled. She became the silence that haunted the Blackburn home, quiet, obedient, invisible on the surface. But beneath that stillness, something dark began to stir, and it would not stay buried for long. After Eli's death, her world dimmed. The colors faded from the fields. Even the sun seemed duller. But beneath that quiet grief, something cold began to take shape, a patience sharpened by pain. The master, Edward Blackburn, mistook her silence for obedience. He thought grief had broken her, made her soft. He was wrong. Each morning Harriet served his breakfast with the same calm hands that once trembled. She poured his coffee, laid the silver, and bowed her head. To him, she was invisible, a shadow that moved when ordered. But in truth, she was studying, watching, counting. She learned the rhythm of the house, when the keys were hung, when the medicine chest was unlocked, when Margaret Blackburn took her evening tea from the red porcelain cup. She memorized the way Edward drank until his words slurred, and the way Margaret's voice turned cruel when the wine ran low. Every habit, every weakness, folded quietly into Harriet's mind. She began collecting things, small things, useless to others, priceless to her. Bits of dried herbs from the kitchen, old corks from medicine bottles, fragments of glass she found near the doctor's cart. Each one was hidden carefully, as if the earth itself conspired to help her. Revenge did not arrive like thunder. It crept in, soft, invisible, patient. It grew like rot in the walls of the Blackburn home. The air inside the manor changed first. The clocks began to tick louder. The floors groaned at night. The wind through the shutters sounded like whispers. The other slaves spoke of bad luck, of curses, but Harriet said nothing. She only worked, as always, quiet, steady, unblinking. What no one realized was that her silence was no longer submission. It was timing. Every meal she served, every hallway she crossed, every candle she lit, all were part of something larger, something waiting to be born. And though no one saw it yet, the house had begun to sense it too. I want to request you subscribe, not for entertainment, but for remembrance. Every week, we resurrect a story the world wanted, forgotten. And once you hear one, you'll crave the next. October 31st. The air hung cold, heavy with the smell of rain and roasted corn. Inside the grand house, laughter drifted from the parlor, brittle and shallow. The Blackburns were hosting their harvest gathering, a yearly performance of wealth and control. Music echoed against the old stone walls, while guests in fine coats clinked their glasses and spoke of crops, profits, and the coming election. Harriet moved quietly between them, carrying cider, refilling cups, adjusting candles that flickered in the draught. Her hands never shook, though the flame in her eyes burned steady now, small, dangerous, unseen. In her apron pocket, she carried a small glass vial, clear, unremarkable, deadly. She had taken it from the plantation doctor weeks before. He said it was a tincture for easing pain. He never said what happened when the dose grew too strong. But Harriet had learned. She always learned. Every sound seemed to slow that night. The violin's echo, the laughter of the mistress, the distant rumble of thunder. Even the clocks seemed to wait. She moved through it all like a whisper, calm and certain. As midnight crept near, she slipped away from the crowd and into the kitchen. The lantern flame trembled as she set the red porcelain teacup before her, the same one Margaret Blackburn always demanded. The kettle hissed. Steam curled upward like breath from the grave. Harriet uncorked the vial. One drop, then another. The mixture swirled through the tea like smoke through moonlight. For a long moment, she simply stared at the cup, at her reflection in it, then poured. The sounds around her sharpened the tick of the clock, the rattle of the window, the storm pressing against the walls. Even the fire seemed to lean closer. She carried the tray back to the parlor, her steps soft, her face still. No one noticed her eyes, calm, empty, endless. She placed the cup before the mistress, bowed her head, and turned away. That night, Harriet served her master one last time. I want to request you tap that like button, not for me, but for every voice that never got to speak. It's how you tell the system their pain still matters. The music had barely faded when the first toast began. Edward Blackburn, standing tall at the head of the table, raised his glass, boasting of harvests, of loyalty, of order. The guests cheered, unaware that history was already turning its page. Harriet stood at the edge of the room, her hands folded neatly, her eyes steady on the red porcelain cup before the mistress. The laughter came first, bright, echoing, hollow. Then, a cough. One, then another. A chair scraped against the floor. Margaret Blackburn reached for her throat, her smile collapsing into terror. The overseer followed, gasping, his face pale as wax. Then proud Edward, staggered back, knocking over his chair as he clawed for air. His eyes met Harriet's for one fleeting second, as if trying to read the silence that had always surrounded her. Within minutes, the room that once rang with laughter filled instead with chaos. Guests screamed. A servant dropped a tray, silver crashing against the floor. Harriet did not move. She stood near the doorway, still as stone, her face unreadable, neither joy nor sorrow, only release. 3 bodies fell before the clock struck 1. The storm outside howled through the shutters, shaking the house like the voice of judgment itself. Those who could still stand fled into the rain, shouting her name into the night. Harriet, where is she? But she did not hide. She walked calmly to the front door, her steps light, almost graceful. She opened it wide, and the wind met her like an old friend. Lightning flashed across the fields, and in that silver moment, her shadow stretched long against the walls, then disappeared. By dawn, the Blackburn mansion was silent. The guests had gone, the bodies lay cold, and the hearth had burned itself out. They searched the house, the woods, even the riverbanks, but there was no trace of her. Only footprints that ended in mud, and a single lantern still burning by the gate. Some claimed she escaped north. Others swore they saw her light drifting across the fields long after. But the truth, the earth itself seemed to keep her secret. The morning light found the Blackburn plantation in ruins. Smoke still curled from the kitchen. The dining room stood overturned, and whispers of what had happened in the night clung to every wall. Before breakfast, hounds were brought from the next county lane, sharp-nosed beasts trained to hunt men. They were given a single task: find Harriet. But when they reached the edge of the woods, the dogs froze. Their howls stopped cold beneath the old oak tree, the very tree where Eli had been hanged 2 years before. Beyond it, the air was still, as if the forest itself refused to carry her scent any further. Edward's men searched for days. They dragged the river, tore open the muddy banks, even drained the wells. They turned over every plank in her quarters, ripped open her straw mattress, sifted through ashes in the hearth. But there was nothing, not a footprint, not a shred of cloth. The overseer said she must have drowned, though no one could say where. Others swore she had turned to smoke. By the third night, the men stopped talking about her escape altogether. They began to whisper instead of the knocks. It started just after midnight. 3 slow, heavy knocks on the front door of the manor. Always 3. Always the same rhythm. When someone went to look, there was nothing there. No wind, no shadow, no sound. Just silence thick enough to make your bones feel hollow. The knocking came again the next night. And again the one after that. The new servants refused to go near the door after dark. Some quit outright, saying they'd seen a woman's shadow drift across the hall when no candle was lit by Halloween. Even the Blackburns could no longer sleep. Margaret began leaving candles burning in every window, their small flames trembling against the glass. And from that year on, no one on that land dared to let the fire die before dawn, because somewhere between the river and the oak, they believed Harriet still walked quiet, unseen, and unburied. I want to request you tap that like button, not for me, but for every voice that never got to speak. It's how you tell the system their pain still matters. Harriet, the house slave from Virginia, who vanished after taking her revenge on the black, was never found, but her story refused to die with her. Years rolled by, and the world around that cursed plantation changed. The Civil War thundered through the South, leaving ashes, freedom, and ruin in its wake. The Blackburn estate fell silent. Vines swallowed the walls, the roof caved in, and the family name itself was wiped from the county's records. Yet somehow, people kept talking about her, the woman who would not rest. Travelers passing through those back roads claimed to see strange things. Some said they spotted a woman's shape in the broken windows of the old manor, her face pale, watching. Others swore they saw a single lantern swinging far out in the fields, glowing like a star that refused to die, moving slow, back and forth, as if someone were still searching for something she'd lost. Children in nearby towns turned the story into a dare. Every Halloween, they'd whisper her name 3 times and creep up to the rusted gate of the Blackburn land. The bravest tried to touch the front door, but not one ever made it that far. Most said the air turned to cold, or they heard knocking from inside, like someone trapped between worlds. Soon, Harriet's story became more than a ghost tale. It became a lesson, a warning wrapped in mystery. To some, she was the restless spirit of vengeance, punishing cruelty that went unrepented. To others, she was a guardian, watching over the forgotten graves of those who had no justice in life. Every town along the river told her story a little differently, but the ending was always the same. No matter how much time passed, the earth remembered her. Even now, farmers say that when the fog rolls in thick over the fields, you can hear soft footsteps moving through the grass, slow, steady, and deliberate, as if Harriet is still walking home, because some revenge isn't taken in blood or fire. Some revenge is simply never letting them forget. I want to request you share this story, because silence helped bury the truth. Your share makes sure that silence never wins again. In 1960, a team of historians, digging through the ruins of the old Blackburn Plantation, uncovered what no one expected, a ledger. Its ink had faded, but one name stood out clear, as if time had refused to erase it. Harriet, age 27, status, missing. October, 1860. No mention of her death. No grave. Just that single word, missing. The discovery changed everything. Newspapers ran the story, calling it the vanishing slave of Blackburn. Scholars tried to trace her life, her family, her fate, but every path led into darkness. Still, the deeper they searched, the more the whispers began again. People living near the ruins claimed that every Halloween, a soft lantern light could be seen glowing between the collapsed walls. It never flickered like fire. It floated, slow and steady, as if someone was walking with purpose through the night. Then came the investigators. Cameras, recorders, instruments, all trying to prove or disprove the haunting. Most found nothing but wind and silence, but one recording stood out. Late one October night, a microphone caught a whisper, faint, distant, and unmistakably human. A woman's voice, repeating a single name, Eli. That one word carried the weight of every rumor, every tear, every unburied truth. People began to see Harriet, not as a ghost to be feared, but as a presence to be honored. She wasn't haunting the land, she was guarding it. Her lantern became a symbol of those who fought in silence, who were erased but never forgotten. Over time, her story outgrew superstition. Schools told it as history. Locals left flowers at the ruins. Some even said the glow had softened, as if her spirit, finally recognized, could rest, but only a little, because her story wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to every soul buried without justice, every voice that had been silenced. And when the wind moves through those Virginia fields, carrying the faint scent of smoke and rain, some still swear you can hear it, not as a warning, but as remembrance. Harriet never vanished. She simply became history, refusing to be forgotten. The story ends where it began, on the same soil that once drank the blood of the blackbirds. Thunder rolls across the Virginia sky as the camera drifts slowly through the overgrown fields. The air feels thick, charged, almost waiting. Each blade of grass bends under the wind like it remembers her footsteps. In the distance, the old Blackburn Manor still stands, broken, hollow, but alive. Its windows stare like blind eyes, its walls cracked but stubbornly refusing to fall, and on the porch, a single lantern burns. The flame sways, small but defiant, cutting through the dark like memory itself. It's the same kind of light she once carried through those endless nights of servitude, except now, it belongs to no one. Then, as the wind rises, it happens. 3 slow knocks, deliberate, heavy, each one echoes through the wood like a heartbeat under the earth. The door trembles. Dust falls from the frame, but no one stands there. Not a shadow, not a soul, just the echo deep and unending. The camera holds steady on that door, the sound of the storm closing in, and somewhere between the thunder and the wind, a whisper threads through the air. It isn't loud, it isn't clear, but it feels like her, like Harriet, reminding the living that justice is not always gentle. Some ghosts don't ask for peace, the narrator says softly, voice trembling like the lantern flame. They ask for witness. The shot lingers. The house breathes again, boards creaking, wind clawing through its bones. And for a moment, you can almost see her, not as a spirit, but as something greater. A reckoning, a question carved into history itself. Because maybe Harriet wasn't just a killer. Maybe she was the voice of every forgotten soul, demanding to be seen. The door shudders once more, the lantern flickers, and then, darkness, we're left suspended between two truths, justice or vengeance. And in that silence, one thing becomes clear. History doesn't forget. It knocks again and again, until someone finally listens. Don't look away. The final moment will twist everything you think you know. Justice reveals itself only at the end. The story ends where it began, on the same soil that once drank the blood of the blackbirds. Thunder rolls across the Virginia sky as the camera drifts slowly through the overgrown fields. The air feels thick, charged, almost waiting. Each blade of grass bends under the wind like it remembers her footsteps. In the distance, the old Blackburn Manor still stands, broken, hollow, but alive. Its windows stare like blind eyes, its walls cracked, but stubbornly refusing to fall, and on the porch, a single lantern burns. The flame sways, small but defiant, cutting through the dark like memory itself. It's the same kind of light she once carried through those endless nights of servitude, except now, it belongs to no one. Then, as the wind rises, it happens. 3 slow knocks, deliberate, heavy, Each one echoes through the wood like a heartbeat under the earth. The door trembles. Dust falls from the frame. But no one stands there. Not a shadow. Not a soul. Just the echo, deep and unending. The camera holds steady on that door, the sound of the storm closing in, and somewhere between the thunder and the wind, a whisper threads through the air. It isn't loud. It isn't clear. But it feels like her, like Harriet, reminding the living that justice is not always gentle. Some ghosts don't ask for peace. The narrator says softly, voice trembling like the lantern flame. They ask for witness. The shot lingers. The house breathes again, boards creaking, wind clawing through its bones. And for a moment, you can almost see her, not as a spirit, but as something greater. A reckoning, a question carved into history itself. What did this story make you feel? Comment your thoughts below, because every time someone speaks about it, history shifts a little closer to justice. Because maybe Harriet wasn't just a killer. Maybe she was the voice of every forgotten soul, demanding to be seen. The door shudders once more, the lantern flickers, and then, darkness, we're left suspended between two truths, justice or vengeance. And in that silence, one thing becomes clear. History doesn't forget. It knocks again and again, until someone finally listens.